Shivaya.
There was a time when human beings did not divide reality into physics, philosophy, and prayer. There was only the world, burning, breathing, shimmering before them. The wind moved, the fire spoke, the sky stretched beyond measure. And in that world, the ancient Vedic seers did not merely look at nature, they looked through it. To the modern eye, a sacred fire ritual may seem like an artifact of another age, a ceremonial flame, an altar, an offering, a chant repeated into the silence. But what if that is not all it was? What if hidden inside those rituals was not modern science in its technical form, but something more unsettling? An early intuition that reality is not as solid, stable, or simple as it appears. Because today, when physicists speak of fields, fluctuations, probability, invisible structures, and energies that cannot be seen directly but only inferred through interaction, they are describing a universe that feels strangely distant from everyday experience. And yet, in a completely different language, ancient thinkers too described a world beneath the visible world, a reality in motion, a cosmos sustained by pattern, transformation, rhythm, and an unseen order that gives rise to everything we call matter, life, and mind. This is not the claim that the Vedas invented quantum mechanics. It is something far more interesting. It is the possibility that ancient ritual and modern physics, though separated by thousands of years and radically different methods, are both confronting the same mystery. What is reality before it becomes obvious to the senses? At the center of the Vedic ritual stands Agni, the fire, not merely as flame, not merely as heat, but as presence. Agni is transformation made visible. Wood becomes light, offering becomes ash, matter becomes motion, the still becomes active, the hidden becomes manifest. In the Vedic imagination, fire is not passive. It carries, it transmits, it mediates between realms. And that is where the comparison becomes fascinating. Because modern physics, at its deepest levels, no longer sees reality as a collection of fixed little objects. It sees a world of excitations, interactions, probabilities, and dynamic states emerging from underlying fields. The universe, in this view, is not built like a machine made of hard pieces. It behaves more like an ongoing event, a vibration, a fluctuation, a pattern in motion. Watch a ritual flame long enough, and it resists your attempt to reduce it to a simple thing. It is form, but never fixed form. It has shape, but never one shape. It is visible instability, order and disorder dancing together in real time. The ancients did not call this quantum fluctuation. They did not speak in equations. They did not build colliders. But they did recognize something profound. that reality is not dead substance. It is alive with transition. And around that fire, they built not chaos, but precision. The altar was measured. The ritual was timed. The chant was structured.
Om Agni Mile Purushta Yesya Tatam.
The geometry mattered. Nothing was accidental. This too should make us pause, because whenever human beings suspect that hidden reality has order, they begin with pattern, with number, with symmetry, with repetition. That is true of ritual, and it is true of science. The Vedic altar was never a laboratory in the modern sense, but it was a disciplined attempt to align the human act with cosmic order. A way of saying, the world beneath appearances is not random noise. It has structure. And if it has structure, then it can be approached, not only through instruments, but through attention. This is where the role of the observer becomes especially compelling. In ritual, the practitioner is not a spectator. He does not stand outside the event. He enters into it. His posture matters. His timing matters. His speech matters. His state of mind matters. The ritual space changes because consciousness is not treated as irrelevant. It is treated as participatory. Modern physics does not tell us that human consciousness magically controls particles. That is a popular distortion. But it does force us to confront a difficult truth. Observation is never as simple as passive looking. To measure is to interact. To detect is to alter. To know the world at its most fundamental level is to enter into a relationship with it. The ancients arrived at this through sacred discipline. Science arrived at it through experiment. But both, in very different ways, shattered the fantasy of a detached observer standing completely outside reality. And then there is Akasha. Often translated inadequately as space or ether, Akasha in Indian thought is not empty nothingness. It is the subtle matrix in which sound travels, form appears, and existence unfolds. It is not identical to any modern physical theory, but conceptually, it is striking that ancient thinkers refused to see emptiness as mere absence. Today, physics also describes a vacuum that is not truly empty. Even what we call emptiness teems with structure, potential, and strange activity at the limits of measurement. Again, not identity, but resonance. And perhaps that resonance matters more than people think, because what the Vedic mind grasped intuitively was that the visible world is not self-sufficient. It emerges. It depends. It arises from deeper realities, not immediately available to the ordinary eye. That instinct lies at the heart of both metaphysics and fundamental physics. Then comes the most ambitious idea of all, Brahman, the infinite, the unbounded, the ground of all that is. Brahman is not a particle, not a field equation, not an energy signature. It is something far more philosophically immense. That from which all multiplicity emerges, within which all distinctions arise, and into which all names and forms ultimately dissolve. Modern cosmology, in its own language, speaks of expansion, origins, hidden unity, and interconnectedness across incomprehensible scales. Quantum theory speaks of realities that defy the logic of ordinary objects. Neither of these proves Brahman, but they do make the old material certainties feel smaller. They remind us that reality is stranger than common sense, more relational than isolated, more subtle than surface appearances suggest. And perhaps that is why these comparisons endure. Not because the ancients secretly wrote textbooks in symbolic form, but because they took existence seriously enough to see mystery where others saw only routine. They understood that fire was never just fire, that sound was never just sound, that space was never just emptiness, that consciousness was not a side effect to be ignored, but one of the deepest facts of existence. Now, in our own age, we stand surrounded by technologies the ancients could never have imagined. Particle accelerators, quantum computation, AI systems that generate patterns faster than the human eye can interpret them, neural interfaces probing the threshold between brain, signal, and intention. Our instruments are more powerful than ever. But the question remains ancient. What is this universe really? What is the relationship between matter and mind? Between pattern and meaning? Between what can be measured and what can only be realized? The old sages approached those questions inwardly. Modern science approaches them outwardly. One through contemplation, the other through instrumentation. One through disciplined awareness, the other through disciplined doubt. And perhaps the future will belong not to those who confuse the two, but to those who know how to let each illuminate the other. Because the deepest insight may not be that ancient ritual predicted modern physics. It may be that both reveal the same human hunger. To discover whether the universe is merely a mechanism or a mystery, structured with such depth that every flame, every pattern, every act of attention becomes a doorway into the hidden architecture of the real. So the next time you see a sacred fire rise into darkness, do not ask only what the ancients believed. Ask what they were trying to see. Because long before equations began to describe the invisible, human beings were already standing before light, watching transformation unfold, and wondering whether reality itself was far more subtle, far more alive, and far more interconnected than the ordinary eye could ever grasp. And perhaps, after all these centuries, we are still standing before the same fire. To know more about the Vedas, like, share, and subscribe.